Hello, my name is Edwin Tetlow, and welcome to my presentation on MyGov, which is a UX case study that I've put together. So we'll get started. Just as a quick introduction, what is MyGov? So MyGov's designed as a simple and secure way to access online government services, whether it's Centrelink, the Australian Taxation Office, or Medicare, and much more in the one place. MyGov actually provides two login methods to the platform, and one of which involves an authenticator app called MyGov ID, which is designed as an easy and secure way to prove who you are online. Now, my initial assumptions around MyGov weren't entirely strong. Obviously, the Australian government is often chastised in the media for the quality of their digital services and applications. It's one of those things I've probably heard my dad complain about using it a number of times. In my head, I'm thinking about this tax return that I have to complete through MyGov, and it feels like an absolute chore. And going one step further, there's even satirical news articles going around. For example, Batuta Advocate often does articles about MyGov as a little bit of a nod to how we as a society kind of interpret the platform. Now, this is where my user journey of MyGov started, and dare I say it's the starting point for a lot of users. And it all begins with this one MyGov inbox message, which we've all received. It's basically an email saying you have a new message in your MyGov inbox, regards MyGov team, and that's it. There's no call to action, there's no hyperlink. It doesn't even tell you what their message is about. Am I in trouble? Have I done something wrong? Who knows, right? And the same question is probably asked by many users to say, okay, where do I go from now? And incidentally, I was trying to brainstorm ideas for a UX design assignment when this actual email actually came to me. So I decided to map out this process from start to finish, looking at, okay, how do I actually view this MyGov message and how do I log into MyGov? Now, what ended up being quite an onerous process. It took about 15 steps to both check that email, log into MyGov, and view the MyGov message. And I've essentially mapped it out here, doing some sort of lo-fi user journeys. And this is where my original hunch was born. So my original hunch is users might find it difficult and onerous to log into MyGov and complete relevant tasks. And my objective was to improve the MyGov ID login process to make it easier and more efficient for users. To do this, I looked at the double diamond design framework. So what I did was I started with a general problem statement and wanted to understand that problem through further research, and then be able to narrow in on a specific problem to address through insights that I would then uncover. I would then look to ideate some solutions, and then from that ideation process, be able to narrow down some more refined prototypes, which would articulate a specific solution. So the initial part of the research process began with some benchmarking. So I looked at a couple of similar government services apps, including MySA.gov, as well as the app for the Australian Taxation Office. And after looking at these apps, I noticed some distinct similarities between these apps and also MyGov, in that there were incoherent user flows, there were repeat prompts and redirects, and just with information that was poorly presented. I also looked at some general desktop research. Obviously, given MyGov ID as an app, there's no shortage of reviews online, and as you can see from these key reviews that I've picked out, it was lucky to clear more than 1-star reviews. The reviews and sentiments from users were quite outrageous. In fact, one user likened it to if COVID was an app. So obviously there was quite a large amount of negative sentiment out there. And some of the key insights from these reviews was, poor service when calling the help desk, onerous login processes, even by computer literate people. Many users suggest allowing several hours to complete anything through MyGov, as well as, excessive security features and people struggling with proof of identity and validation checks. And then I moved on to the process where I conducted some user interviews. So I interviewed a total of 3 users, and here's where I've sort of captured the key insights and recommendations. So all of the users that I interviewed unanimously agreed that they all struggle to remember passwords. And this was really interesting because MyGov's only logged into maybe once or twice a year, if that, which makes a lot of sense and does make that login process more onerous. Another key insight was that the MyGov platform does not have good calls to action or directives for the users, often leaving people feel stuck, and a few times people weren't able to figure out how to even log in. The third key insight that I picked up was that original email that I touched on earlier. Where it notifies you that you have a new message in your MyGov inbox, yet it doesn't give you any form of indication as to what it's about. There's no subject line, there's no hyperlink. Am I in trouble, or is it just a boring old statement that I'm trying to learn from? And this then fed into some recommendations in terms of, how can I adapt these insights and make improvements to the login process. So this is where I began my ideation phase, and I used what was called a crazy eights technique. It was essentially me just jotting down on paper and brainstorming as many possible solutions as I could, and ones which hopefully could essentially address the key insights which I had just uncovered. I then, obviously, to prioritize these solutions, I came up with a decision matrix, and I was able to sort of categorize my solutions from the perspective of impact versus effort. So obviously prioritizing solutions which would create high impact, but also a low amount of effort. The other prioritization method that I used was the DFV framework, which is the desirability, feasibility, and viability framework. And I attempted to imagine the Australian government as the client and tried to think about the various solutions from the perspectives of a number of different stakeholders, such as the users themselves, developers, key decision makers, legal assurance teams, as well as finance, costing teams, and also the taxpayers, and tried to prioritize the ones which would be highly rated in each of those criterias. Once I'd prioritized the solutions, I began drafting a lo-fi paper prototype just to see, the types of enhancements that I could make and what it would actually look like on paper. And surprisingly, what began as a 15-step process to log into MyGov through MyGov ID, I was actually able to narrow down to 9 steps just by eliminating a few sort of unnecessary steps. The next step of the process was I actually wanted to produce a mid-fidelity prototype, essentially a clickable prototype, and one which I could test with users. So some of the key design features which I wanted to incorporate was improving that initial communication and including a subject line in that original MyGov email. And the other thing I wanted to include was an actual hyperlink directing users straight to the MyGov login page so that they could access that message sooner. Another thing I looked into was shortening the authentication process. One of the great things about logging in through MyGov ID was that there's no need for a password, and that kind of addresses one of the earlier insights which I uncovered. And also just general sort of cleaner landing pages, improved navigation, inbox is accessible from the home page, and a welcome message at the top of the screen. I then moved on to prototype and user testing and looked at some of the key insights. Now, one of the users actually mentioned, the original email is simply a hyperlink to another email or message. Why can't the original email just include the entire message in its entirety? And that was one of the key improvements that I made to my prototype, was actually including the email content in the original email. Another insight was comments around the government logos being clear and ensuring that consistency of branding to give the nod to legitimacy. So I was conscious to adapt that into my prototype to make it more consistent and appear more legit. As well as just some upgrades to some of the functionality in the MyGov platform, such as the email inbox and just having a method to see, read or unread messages and just some functionality to prompt me to view any messages that I haven't reviewed yet. And this is basically an example of me incorporating some of the insights that I learned from the user testing. So you'll see in that original MyGov email, the entire message content is in there. That way, when you log into MyGov, you can essentially action tasks rather than just view messages. I've sort of looked at the consistency of branding in the actual MyGov app, using the proper logos, proper color schemes, and so forth, just to ensure that legitimacy, and also including that functionality into the MyGov inbox as well. So before I go, I just want to take you through my clickable mid-fi prototype. So we have here, we start with the MyGov email in my inbox. So I click on that. I've got the entire message here. I've got a clear subject line, and I've got the message contents here. So all I have to do now is click to log into MyGov. Now here I am on the login screen. I'm able to log in using the MyGov ID app, so I'll click that option. Because I already have the app downloaded, all I have to do now is just insert my email address and click login. Now on my phone, I've gotten a request regarding this validation code. So all I have to do is click the notification and accept, and I'm now being redirected to MyGov. And now that I'm in MyGov, I can click into my inbox and I can read my message notification. Anyway, that concludes my presentation for this UX case study. Thank you very much for listening. Cheers.